newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison LaGrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. The United States and Qatar are close to finalizing an enhanced defense deal, says the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio during the Doha visit, days after Israel struck Hamas political leaders in the Gulf country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urges U.S. President Donald Trump to take a clear position on a sanctions package against Russia and security guarantees for Ukraine, aiming to stop Russian leader Vladimir Putin and end the war. China's Coast Guard fires a water cannon at Philippine ships near the disputed Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea, accusing Manila of an illegal intrusion and ramming into one of its vessels. And heavy rain, cloudbursts and landslides batter northern Indian states of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, with major cities including Dehradun severely affected. Several homes and shops have been damaged and many vehicles were swept away. And a shipowner wanted over a 2020 blast at a Beirut port that killed more than 220 people has been arrested in Bulgaria. The disaster is one of the world's largest non-nuclear explosions. Hello and welcome. Our top story is from Ghana. Amid controversy and a legal showdown over U.S. deportations of West African migrants, Ghana has defended its decision to accept them, while stressing this does not mean an endorsement of U.S. immigration policies. At a press conference, Ghana's foreign minister said the move to accept a limited number of West African deportees from the U.S. aligns with Pan-African ideals and a commitment to regional solidarity. However, he warned it should not be misconstrued as an endorsement of the Trump administration's policies.
The government of Ghana took the principled and humanitarian decision to accept the limited number of West African nationals deported from the United States under exceptional circumstances, in line with Ghana's long-standing Pan-African ideals and unwavering commitment to regional solidarity. We are standing up for our brothers and sisters in distress, and this should not be misconstrued as an endorsement of the immigration policies of the Trump administration.
The foreign minister added that Ghana has neither received nor sought any financial compensation in exchange for deportees. He said that the migrants were being held in detention and risked being sent to unsafe countries.
Many of these individuals were being held in detention, which was both psychologically and physically distressing. They were also faced with the risk of being deported to countries that are not safe and do not have the stability and human rights credentials Ghana is famed for. You need to note that President Trump has secured a positive verdict from the U.S. Supreme Court that he could go ahead and remove these nationals and dump them anywhere.
Last week, President John Mahama confirmed an agreement to receive third country migrants from the U.S., with 14 already arriving from Nigeria and Gambia. But the policy is at the center of a major legal fight in the U.S. A federal judge accused the Trump administration of circumventing immigration laws, calling it a deliberate scheme to ignore court-ordered protections for migrants who face persecution in their home countries. Now, Judge Tanya Chutkan, an Obama appointee, called an emergency hearing after lawyers warned their clients could be forced back to their home country from Ghana, where they fear torture or persecution. Although she could not provide relief, she urged the administration not to return migrants to danger. The U.S. Justice Department has responded that the courts have no authority over diplomatic decisions, arguing that migrants can be sent to third countries under a Supreme Court ruling. Ghana's foreign minister has not clarified his position on these comments. In Ghana, public opinion on the matter remains.
I think that we are there.
In Ghana, public opinion on the matter remains deeply divided. Opposition lawmakers have called for the agreement to be halted, insisting it should have been approved by Parliament. Trump, in his second term, has intensified his immigration crackdown by deporting migrants to countries they have no ties with. Now, so far, the Trump administration has expanded third country deportations to Panama, El Salvador, South Sudan, Eswatini, Rwanda, Uganda, and now Ghana. The policy remains highly controversial, with critics calling it ethically questionable and warning that host nations are being used as dumping grounds for migrants. Analysts believe that nations agree to receive U.S. deportees to improve ties with Washington, and often in expectation of financial compensation. But Ghana has stressed it is seeking neither. While the controversy over this decision remains, how should one really see this deal? And moving on to Kenya now, where a race to power is heating up ahead of the 2027 polls. The former Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, once an ally, now a foe, has launched his bid to unseat President William Ruto. Gachagua, who was impeached last year after a fallout with Ruto, has declared himself the most courageous and capable candidate to end Ruto's presidency after a single term. This sets the stage for a fierce political battle in the East African country. Now, he plans to run under the newly launched Democracy for the Citizens Party, or the DCP, which he founded after quitting Ruto's UDA party. Gachagua is working to weave a coalition of prominent leaders who also eye the presidency under a united front. Now, Rigathi Gachagua is Kenya's first deputy president to be impeached. He is popularly known as Riggy G. His power base remains the vote-rich Mount Kenya region, where he once helped Ruto to victory in 2022. The victory in Mount Kenya paved the way for Ruto to secure the presidency. Now, this region could be the arena where he defeats his former boss. Tensions between Gachagua and Ruto emerged last year, with Gachagua feeling marginalized and excluded from key decisions. He was accused of backing widespread anti-government protests, which Ruto's camp called treasonous. Charged with insubordination, corruption, money laundering, and ethnic incitement, he was ultimately removed from office in October last year. Gachagua denies all allegations, calling them politically motivated. Since then, he has turned into a strong critic of Ruto. However, a significant legal obstacle looms. His impeachment still stands. For his presidential bid to be valid, he must have the courts overturn his impeachment. But as Gachagua announces his bid, the political landscape has fragmented further, with a united opposition coalition gaining ground. Amid public dissatisfaction over the economy and governance, many Kenyans are calling for President Ruto's resignation. Also in the mix is human rights activist Boniface Mwangi, who has announced his presidential bid last month. He has played a leading role in anti-government protests. His candidacy will test whether the youth-led protest movement can translate into electoral power. So the political heat in Kenya continues to rise. With the opposition unifying and public dissatisfaction growing, Kenya faces a pivotal moment in its political journey. Will President Ruto overcome this mounting political challenge? Or is the growing opposition and public discontent heading toward unseating him in 2027? And moving on, let's turn our attention to South Sudan, where the opposition has called for an armed mobilization to carry out a regime change. The opposition is angry at President Salva Kiir for targeting their leader, Machar. Now, Machar served as South Sudan's first vice president. Last week, he was charged with murder, treason, and crimes against humanity. And hours later, he was stripped of his position. Machar has been accused of ordering a militia attack on a military base in March. A militia from Machar's ethnic Nuer community, known as the White Army, attacked a military base in Nasir. More than 250 soldiers were killed in the attack, and among the dead were several senior officers and UN pilots. After the attack, Machar was put under house arrest. His party has denied the allegations and has accused President Kiir of trying to sideline the opposition to consolidate power. Machar's party has released a statement on social media calling the current regime a setup of dictatorship, peace spoilers, and state capture that is holding power illegally and by violence. And the statement further said that Machar's party and its armed forces shall work to carry out a regime change in the country. In its statement, the opposition called on its supporters to report for national service in defense of the citizens and the country. The growing rift between camps led by President Kiir and Machar is threatening to undo years of progress and tip the young country back into a civil war. Now, to understand this, let's take a look at the history. South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011. But soon a civil war broke out between Machar's ethnic Nuer forces and Dinka fighters loyal to his longtime rival, Salva Kiir. The devastating war lasted for 5 years. Nearly 40,000 people were killed. The war ended in 2018 after Kiir and Machar signed a power-sharing agreement. But their partnership has remained tense ever since, and violence has continued between the two rival camps. Attempts by the international community to ensure a democratic transition in the country has failed so far. The elections that were supposed to take place in December last year have once again been postponed to 2026. President Kiir and Machar are long-time rivals, and what brought them together was the 2018 peace deal. But now it seems like the fragile peace deal is unraveling. Machar is out of power, and many of his allies have already been arrested. The anger among Machar's supporters is clearly growing. Now, whether the opposition can actually carry out a regime change or not, time will tell. But the growing rift between President Kiir and Machar's camps could potentially push the country back into a civil war. And our last story is from Malawi, which is voting to choose the next president. The Southeast African nation, with a population of 22 million, is holding elections amid sky-high inflation and surging food prices. Voters are also electing members of parliament and local councillors. Long queues were seen at many polling stations across the mainly rural country hours before opening. Now, some delays were also reported. 17 candidates are running for president, but the main contest is seen between the incumbent president, Lazarus Chakwera, and his predecessor, Peter Mutharika. Now, the two also faced off in the 2019 election, which was annulled over irregularities and followed by a rerun in 2020. The incumbent, Lazarus Chakwera, is 70 years old. He leads the Malawi Congress Party and is seeking a second and final term. Now, the former president, Peter Mutharika, is aged 85. He is the candidate for the Democratic Progressive Party and seeks to Now, both frontrunners have been accused of corruption and economic mismanagement, leaving voters faced with a choice between two disappointments, as per experts. There are several key issues in voters' minds. At the top is economy. Inflation exceeded 27% and food prices were up roughly 30% over the past year. There are several key issues in voters' minds. At the top is the economy. Inflation. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we get you the top stories from the continent and across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Now, India and the United States hold first in-person trade talks since Donald Trump's 50% tariffs against New Delhi. The discussions aim to resolve challenges arising from the high levies against India. Russia's strategic Tu-160 bomber planes launched cruise missiles over the Barents Sea during joint military exercises with Belarus.